before he's ultimately laid to rest.
Priscilla, I'm sure it was a bit of an honor to be able to witness this, and I envy you being able to do that. I wish I'd been there as well. But Priscilla, thank you so much, and we'll speak with you in the next hour. I'm joined right now by Jelani Cobb, staff writer at The New Yorker and MSNBC political analyst, also MSNBC political contributor Jason Johnson. Gentlemen, talk about what we have witnessed, the importance of it, the importance of devoting the time that we did here at MSNBC in an almost reverential way about this man, John Lewis. Jelani, your thoughts first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's all deserved and entirely appropriate for someone of his stature and his standing. I mean, as I've been saying, as a historian, I've been referring to him as a primary source on the history. This is a person who lived through one of the most pivotal points in American society, and not only lived through it, but was an architect in many of the crucial struggles to achieve some semblance of actual democracy in this country. And just on one personal note, the last time I saw Congressman Lewis was last spring. There were congressional hearings on domestic terrorism. And I took my students from Columbia Journalism School down. We hopped on an early train and got there for the hearings. And as a professor, I'm constantly telling my students to not be impressed by status, to not be impressed by standing, that your job is to hold power to account, and that you really should have a skeptical view of the people you encounter, irrespective of how much acclaim they have. And I had to contradict myself because on the way out of that hearing, we ran into Congressman John Lewis, and my students all crowded around. We took a photograph with him. And I wanted them to, he was busy. He was on his way to a hearing of his own, but he stopped and he wanted to know the students' interest, and he wanted to know what they were thinking about and what they thought of the hearing they had attended. And it was that kind of personal investment in the young people, the people coming after, not just simply you do as a matter of being in touch with your constituents, but something that you do when you genuinely care about the future of society and the people whose hands it will be in.
I got to tell you, Jelani, I was smiling as you were describing that because, I've been with this network for a number of years, and I had the very good fortune to interview John Lewis here in the studio. He was sitting right across from me from where I am right now. And it was incredible, the feeling when he came into this studio and sat down. I was rendered speechless, which does not happen very often. And the warmth, the authenticity, the history with this man, the sincerity. There was so much about him that was so impressive. And I will never forget, and I'm entirely grateful that I had that brief interaction with him. He was remarkable. As I turn to you, Jason, about this and what we've witnessed, we made the point that it was 55 years ago that John Lewis went across this bridge and had a very, very different experience. Try to put that into perspective, what he experienced then, what we have given him now, and what all has changed and the extent to which it has changed.
Alex, it's not just that this is an appropriate sort of funeral and procession, but it's necessary because he is a soldier. He is a general. He fought against American apartheid. And if we're going to honor people who literally fought one of the longest running wars in American history, and that's how we have to look at this. The United States of America was essentially an apartheid state for Black people until really the early 70s. And he was one of the people who put his life on the line to bring that system down. And therefore, you cannot spend enough time talking about how magnanimous he is. You can't spend enough time praising him enough because we are losing this generation of people who remember what that battle is about. And I want to add to this because I think this is key about people who have fought those kinds of wars. He never retired. You can take a look at the Congressional Register. He was still sponsoring legislation up until just a couple of weeks ago. My first time of meeting John Lewis was in 2014 in Georgia when he was talking about fighting against then Secretary of State Brian Kemp. and saying that he saw things in Brian Kemp that he hadn't seen since the 1960s when it comes to voter suppression, when it comes to the abuse and the attacks and the domestic terrorism and state-sponsored violence against Black people. So it was always important, not just what he did 50 years ago, but the fact that he never stopped that battle all the way up until the moment he passed. And that's why we can't spend enough time praising him and other people who are part of this long-going struggle in this country.
Yeah, and you know, Jelani, in terms of current events, what are happening now, the last time we saw him in public was there at Lafayette Square in the wake of the put down of the protesters, his reaction to that, seeing the Black Lives Matter mural having been painted there, just a block and change from the White House. What do you think, as he didn't speak a lot about his reaction to that. What do you think, though, must have been going through his mind? He said it was extraordinary, yes, but how far things had come, or had they?
Well, you know, I think that this struggle is a perpetual one, and no one knew that better than Congressman Lewis did. But I don't know what he was thinking, but what I hope he took from that mural was the solace in knowing that the struggle was left in good hands, that he could lay his burden down and not have to worry that there were not people there to pick it up and continue moving it forward. You know, because certainly, you know, it's difficult with his absence. There are very few people who had the stature that he had. And I will remind you and remind the viewers of one other moment in which we saw just how much standing he had. Which was in 2008, in the midst of the heated presidential contest of that year, where things began to veer in very difficult and frightening direction, with people making comments about Barack Obama's ancestry and clearly racial animus being directed at him. And John Lewis said that he was concerned about the tone he was starting to see emerge on the right. And John McCain, who said that he, a person who many people considered a hero, and he said he considered John Lewis a hero to him. And he then made that famous statement where the person said that Barack Obama was a Muslim, and he said, no, he's not. He's an American. He's not a Muslim. He's a person who I happen to have differences with politically. And so although we should be clear that there would not be anything wrong had he been a Muslim. But I think that the point was that no one could have stepped into that conversation and said, look, we need to take the temperature down a notch, other than John Lewis. I don't know that anyone else could have said that and had the same sort of credibility that he did. Right.
Yeah. To that point, and to the point that you made, Jason, I was struck when you said, we are losing people from this generation that have had such an impact in this fight for racial equality. John Lewis, as you well know, was the conscience of Congress, right? So who steps into that role now? No one can step into his shoes, admittedly. Right. But where do we go? Who steps in? Who picks up that mantle?
Alex, I don't know. But I think what's been interesting is with the passing of John Lewis, we're also seeing the end of an era of activism. The civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s and 70s oftentimes focused on great men and great individuals and great leaders. But our modern day civil rights activists have really eschewed that. They've really said, hey, look, we're not going to have one great leader, one great representative who can be taken down, who can be assassinated, who can be disparaged in some shape, way, or form. We have many people who are sort of acting autonomously to move forward. Now, I will be the last person to predict. Who knows if one day our colleague Brittany is going to be a member of Congress or a senator one day, or Alicia Garza or Opal Tometi. We don't know what the future will bring. But I know that there are people who are stepping into those spaces, have been stepping into those spaces, and will continue. They may not be the conscience of the Congress from within the building, but they will definitely be the consciousness of people who care about moving this country to its idealistic future from the outside.
Well, all I can say is neither of you might run for office, but I'm awfully glad we have both of your voices being added to this conversation, much-needed conversation. Thank you, gentlemen. Jelani Cobb, Jason Johnson. Guys, good to see you both on this very, very special day.